Hey, Divi Nation, thanks for dropping by our documentation section to learn all about one of our most powerful, possibly most underrated features, Divi Leads. So what Divi Leads allows you to do is conduct split testing on your website of any page, section, or module. And so split testing is an optimization tool that allows you to test one version of something against another version of something to see which one converts better. By using Divi Leads consistently on your website, your site gets more efficient the longer you use it, and you convert more and more people to the actions that you're most interested in. In short, it helps grow your business. So check this video out. We'll show you how to use Divi Leads and what that entails. Here you go.
In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to use the Divi Leads split testing and conversion optimization system. Now, if you're not familiar with split testing, the idea is pretty simple. You create different versions of your page with different content, color, or positioning, and then you show those versions to different visitors and collect stats to figure out which version of the page is most effective. Now, what makes a page effective for you might be different depending on the page, the purpose of the page. For example, if you have a sales page, the goal of the page would have people to purchase your product. If you have a landing page with an email opt-in form, for example, well, then the goal of that page would be for as many people as possible to land on the page and then end up subscribing to your email newsletter. And so in this case, I'm going to show you an example based on a fictional web design company. And the goal we're going to be trying to achieve here is to have as many people as possible land on our landing page and then request a free quote so that we can then turn those leads into clients down the road. And so here we have a basic landing page. We have our header here, our headline, and then we have some customer testimonials, and finally a call to action module down here with a button that says contact us to get a free quote. Now, considering this page, how do we really know that it's effective if we haven't tested it? Well, that's what split testing is for. We might consider adding different text to the headline. How might different value propositions in the headline affect bounce rate? Depending on how compelling this original message is, might affect how many people end up clicking this down button to read more. How might different testimonials affect a customer's willingness to become a client of yours? Depending on the testimonials you place here, some might sway the visitors one way or another. How might adding more or less testimonials, for example, or changing them up, all that kind of stuff can be tested. And finally, how might different colors affect a visitor's propensity to click the quote button? We could try different size buttons here, different background colors, and then different text within the button. All of these things can be tested as individual split tests using Divi Leads. And so in this example, we're going to create a test on what's probably the most important part of the page, which is the headline text here, because it's the first thing people see. It's what engages the visitors, and it's what's going to eventually drive them down the page down to that sales button. And so heading back to our page here, this is the Divi Builder version of that page. We have a header, some text, 3 testimonials, and finally a call to action module. Now, to enable split testing for any page, you're going to want to open the Divi Builder page settings here, and then just choose yes for enable split testing, and then click save. And once you do that, Divi is going to walk you through the process of setting up your split test. Now, each split test has 2 elements to it: the subject that you're testing and then the goal of the page. And in this case, the subject that we're going to test is that full width header, and so I'm going to select the full width header module as my test subject. And so as we create different versions of the page, we're going to be creating different versions of that full width header module. So I'm going to click proceed and then just select the full width header module here with my yellow cursor. And then next it's going to ask you to select your goal. And anything can be a goal, just like anything can be a test subject. Any section, row, or module can be used as both your test subject or your goal. And depending on the goal you choose, Divi Leads will track different and relevant user engagement stats. So in this example, our goal is to have people click on the call to action button at the bottom of the page. And so I'm going to select that call to action module as my goal by clicking on it with my blue circle cursor here. And then all that's left is to configure the two different test variations so that we can begin our test. And so if we go back to the test here, you can see your call to action, your goal has become blue, and then your test subject has become yellow and it's been duplicated. And these are the two different versions that are going to be shown to different visitors as they land on your page. And you can create any number of different test subjects. So if you had 5 different headlines you wanted to test, then you can create 5 different versions, and each one will be shown to different visitors independently. And then Divi Leads is going to track stats and figure out how each version of this full width header affects the click-through rate of the call to action button down here. Just to make it clear what I'm trying to say here, let's say that you have a really good headline and a really bad headline. The really bad headline is shown to a visitor. They land on your page. The headline doesn't interest them. In fact, maybe it's irrelevant to what they thought they were clicking on, and they just click the back button right away. They don't even explore your page. They never even have a chance to read your testimonials and request that quote. Now, on the other hand, our very, very good headline, which is very catchy, it solves a problem for the visitor, gives a good value proposition, it's enticing, all these things that make a good headline. They see that headline, they go, wow, that's really interesting. I want to read more. They scroll down, they see your testimonials. Now they're very engaged. Oh, wow. This must be a very great company. And finally, they see that request a quote button. And now they're much more likely to click that button since, first of all, they've seen it. And second of all, they've actually been engaged in your page, all because that headline was much better than the terrible headline, which sent visitors running away. And so that's the basic concept here. And you can test anything. You can test the content of the headline. You can test different background images, different colors, absolutely anything. Because how powerful the Divi Builder is, because it lets you, customize absolutely everything, you can also test absolutely everything. But in this case, we're just going to keep it simple. We're going to have 2 different headers with 2 different headlines. I'm just going to change the text content, and that's it. Okay, so I'm going to jump in here to our duplicated header. So we have 2 versions. This first version is the original one. It just says, welcome to our website. Not at all a compelling title. And so I think we can make some pretty big improvements to that. And so I'm going to head over to the second version, open that up, and then I can configure it independently. And in this case, I'm just going to change the title. I'm going to say something like, do you need a beautiful website? They probably do, since they're landing on a landing page for a web designer. And I can say, we can help! Exclamation point. That's much more compelling. It helps the visitor see that you can solve the problem. Uses a cool term like beautiful. And we might even want to add some subject text. So maybe I can add something like some kind of, let's see. I might want to talk about how many customers we've had in the past. So I could say, let's say I have a small web design agency. We have like 500 customers. I can say, find out why 500 customers choose our company. Okay, so now we've created 2 different versions of the header. We can preview them both here. So we have our first version, which just says welcome to our website, and our second version, which has a more compelling headline and a little subtext here. So now I'm going to save the page, and that's it. Our test is ready. In fact, it's already running. And as visitors visit this page, each visitor will be shown one of the 2 variations, and then Divi Leads is going to track stats to figure out which one is most effective. And because we've chosen our call to action module as our goal, Divi knows that there's a button in there, and to click to track clicks to that button, which is going to be the most important metric for us on this test. And once you start split testing, you can see that a new icon is added here. That's our stats icon, and if you open it up, it's going to display stats for this current test. Now, the test needs some time to collect those stats. You need real visitors to visit your website and, either click or not click the button depending on, the version they see. And so you're going to need to give it time. And once a couple visitors have landed on the page, when you come back here, you're going to see some stats. And so here I have a completed test that we can use. So here we have our same exact setup here with both headlines. And here I'm just going to pretend that this test has some time to run. Let's say it's been running for 1 week. And when we click into the stats now, we're going to see some interesting insights. First of all, we can see the conversion rate right away here. We can see that the version number 1 has 43% conversion rate, and version number 2 has 42% conversion rate. So this welcome to our website version, this original version, it has 41%, and the new version has 43%. So the new version is out converting the original version, which is what we expected, but you never really know until you actually test it. So in this case, the test is validating our initial assumptions, but you might find that that's not always the case, which is why split testing is so important. If you head over to the stats here, now you can see some wonderful stats. These are the stats from the last 24 hours. You can see that the initial version, our initial boring header, has had 437 impressions, and 159 of those have resulted in a click on our call to action button, whereas our new version has received 184 clicks. So we've increased our conversion rate considerably. So it's very valuable to us. And we have some other stats too. We have reads, bounces, and goal engagement. And by the way, you can add and remove test subjects here from the graph. If you have a bunch of test subjects, sometimes, seeing all 10 subjects gets a little messy here. You can also go back in time and see the last 7 days, the last month, and then all time. And so we have different stats here. And like I said, depending on the goal you choose, you're going to see different, potential stats here being collected and shown to you. And the most important one is always shown first here, which in this case is clicks. But for example, if you had chosen the WooCommerce, e-commerce module, then Divi Leads would collect sales stats. If you chose the email opt-in module, then Divi Leads would collect form submission stats, conversion stats. And if you choose a module that doesn't have any buttons or any kind of form submissions, then they would just track reading rate. So reads are a little bit different than clicks. Reads just tells you how many visitors actually visually consumed your goal. So that just shows you how many people actually read your goal. So it means that they land on your page, your headline was enticing enough to lure them down the page, and then they actually read your goal. They reached the bottom of the page. That's kind of what it tells us. They reached your goal. They actually read it, and so that's what reads are. Bounces. This is the bounce rate of your page, and now a bounce is when someone lands on your page and then leaves right away. So they land on your page, they didn't consume anything, they bounced. And you don't want people to bounce. You want people to land on your page and then become engaged and engage with your content. And so the goal here would be to reduce the bounce rate. And the bounce rate is determined basically by a specified amount of time. And if the user lands on your page and then they stay on your page for a time that is greater than that kind of bounce rate designation, then they're counted as a non-bounced user. And you can adjust that timing, by the way. So by default, it's just a couple seconds. So if they land on your page and they stay there for more than a few seconds, then they're considered engaged. If they land on your page and they leave right away, then they're considered a bounce. So in this case, a bounce rate would be a very important metric for us, since our test subject is working with the initial thing that people see, the thing that's above the fold, and that really is kind of like the most important part of the page as far as bounce rate is concerned. So this is a great stat for us considering our test subject. And then finally we have goal engagement. Goal engagement is a little bit different than the other stats because it only takes into consideration your goal. It doesn't actually consider the test subject at all. And what the goal engagement does is just tell you how engaging your goal actually is. So for example, if we have a wonderful headline and people are engaged by the test subject and they scroll down the page and they reach your goal and they don't click, it could be because the goal itself is completely uninspiring. So here, for example, if we chose a different button size or button color for our goal, that might affect goal engagement. And then when you're all done, you can end the test and pick the winner. So that's how you end a split test. You can either end it here, or you can disable split testing here, or you can right click and choose end split test. And if you do any of those things, Divi is going to tell you that you need to select the winner, and this is the version that you'd like to keep. So if you have multiple things you're testing, Divi Leads has now made it clear that one is more effective than the other, and so we're going to keep the one that's most effective. And so we're going to select here the one with the highest conversion rate, and once you do that, the other versions will be deleted, your split test will be completed, and you can update the page, and now the split test is done. And next up, you can start testing other things. And so a really, really effective page can be created by testing, almost everything. So we've made one test right now. We tested one variable within one module, but there's so many other things we could test here. In fact, we could test different testimonials, and we could test different call to actions as well. This might be another very important thing to test. And one important thing to note about Divi Leads is that goals and subjects can be the same thing. So for example, if our goal is the call to action, but we also want to test our call to action, we can do that. And so I'm going to show you how to do that right now. I'm going to split test this, and I'm also going to select it as my goal. And so we've created a new split test now, and our goal and subject are exactly the same. And so you can see it's been duplicated here. So now I have two different call to action modules, and I can start configuring them independently, just like we did for our header. And so for here, for example, I might want to test a different button color or a different button size. So if I come into our call to action module settings here, maybe I want to enable custom button styles and bump up the button text size. Maybe I want to change the background color. For example, I could do a green background color. And now we have two different call to actions modules, one with a huge green button and one with a small kind of like semi-transparent button. And using these two different versions, we might come to see that, well, this big green button just results in so many more clicks than the small, transparent button. I mean, that's something that might really be the case. And so, but you won't know until you test it. So here's another great example of a split test we can do. In this case, we're not testing the content, we're actually testing different design elements. And so I could save this and update the page, and then now our new test is running. And over time, we'll figure out just how much more effective or less effective this new version of the button is. And so that's a kind of really basic overview of how split testing works. The system is quite simple. You choose your subject, you choose your goal, you create different versions of your subject, and then you let Divi Leads figure out how those two different or multiple versions affect the conversion rate of your desired goal. Now, there's a couple more things I want to touch on here, and that is over here in the Divi Builder settings, once you enable split testing, there's a couple different things to configure here. One is the bounce rate limit. Now, I talked about bounce rate earlier. A bounced user is someone who lands on your page and then leaves the page quickly. And we have a bounce rate limit here, and this is in seconds. So by default, it's set to 5 seconds. So if a user lands on your page and they leave within 5 seconds, they're considered a bounced user. But you can adjust that. So if you want to be a little bit more strict, if someone comes on your page and they don't stay for 15 seconds, you can consider that a bounce. Or maybe you want to be a little bit more lenient here and say, well, if someone lands on the page and leaves within 3 seconds, then they're considered a bounce. Next up is our stats refresh interval. This is how often Divi Leads will refresh the statistics it's collecting. By By default, it's set to hourly, but you can change that to daily if you want to, give your server a bit of a break, because it does have to, create these graphs and stuff. So if you're running on a shared host and, maybe you're taxing your resources a bit, moving this down to daily could help, although it really shouldn't be a problem, but we added it there just in case. And a final thing, which is actually a really important part of Divi Leads, is shortcode tracking. And what this does is allow you to create your own goals off the page you're testing. So just to explain this a little bit more clearly, let's say you have a sales page like we had earlier, and the on-page goal is to get as many people as possible to click the call to action button. But that call to action button isn't the end of the story for us. That clicking the button doesn't necessarily mean that lead turned into a client or a sale. And so what shortcode tracking does is allow you to track off-page conversions as a secondary metric. For example, let's say you're selling a product through some unknown third-party e-commerce plugin, or you're using some third-party CRM system, and you want to track not only how often people click the button to request a quote or purchase your product, you want to figure out how many of those people actually turned into real customers or real clients, and you can do that using the shortcode tracking. So you can take this shortcode and place it on any page, and then that will become a new metric in the Divi Builder stats. So let's say you have let's say you're selling a product, and at the end of the sales process, users get referred to a thank you page. You could take this shortcode and place it on the thank you page, and then you could figure out how many people actually went all the way to the end of your sales funnel. And so that would track, true sales. But it doesn't have to be sales. It can be anything. So that's kind of like the basis for this shortcode tracking. And yep, that's a basic overview of Divi Leads. If you have any questions, be sure to swing by the support forum. And there's also some additional info in the written content below this video. I go over how the stats are calculated exactly, and if those are a bit confusing. And then I go over shortcode tracking in a bit more detail. I know that concept can be a little bit hard to grasp, so be sure to scroll down and view those tutorials in more detail.